The email arrived at 1:12 a.m., glowing harshly on Harper Lane's cracked iPhone screen as the wind outside rattled her thin apartment windows. She was half asleep on her worn-out couch, still in her Barnes & Noble uniform, the scent of old paper and cheap floor cleaner clinging to her hair. At first she thought it was another bill she couldn't pay. Then she saw the sender. Brendan Hale, her ex-husband. Her stomach knotted instantly. The subject line read, "Invitation? I think you'll appreciate this." He always knew how to twist words into knives. Harper hesitated before opening it. Brendan never contacted her without a reason, usually one that ended with her hurting. And tonight, when the city felt colder than usual, she wasn't sure she could survive another blow. But curiosity, or maybe the ghost of the woman she used to be, pushed her thumb forward. Inside the email was an ornate digital invitation bordered in gold. The 10th anniversary gala of Hale & Rowe Capital, hosted at the Plaza Hotel, black tie. Harper blinked. Was this a mistake? Then she read the line beneath it, typed in a tone she knew too well. Sweet on the surface, venom underneath. Harper, I know you've had a tough time since the divorce. I thought you might enjoy seeing how far I've come. Don't worry about a dress. Anything simple will be fine. Her chest tightened. She could practically hear the smirk in his voice. He wasn't inviting her out of kindness. He wanted an audience. He wanted her to stand under those crystal chandeliers, surrounded by Manhattan's elite, looking exactly like the failure he claimed she was. Her eyes burned. She closed the email but couldn't unread it. The clock on her wall ticked loudly, mocking her. The rent was due. Her mother's hospital bill sat unopened on the coffee table. Her bank account held $92.04. And Brendan, wealthy, polished, adored by the financial world, wanted to parade her humiliation under the plaza's golden lights. Harper pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, willing herself not to cry. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. But as she stared at the invitation again, a strange feeling stirred deep in her chest. Not fear, not sadness. A spark, a warning, a beginning. Because Harper Lane had no idea that someone powerful was about to step into her life and turn this cruel invitation into the night Brendan Hale would regret forever. Harper Lane hadn't always lived in a cramped Queens apartment with peeling paint and a landlord who ignored her calls. 4 years earlier, her world had looked painfully different. Full of promise, full of love, or what she thought was love. Sometimes in the quiet moments before sunrise, she could still see it clearly. The tiny coffee shop in Columbus, Ohio, where she first met Brendan Hale. He was 28 then, handsome in a polished, almost intimidating way, wearing a crisp shirt and holding a Mont Blanc pen like he was born to command boardrooms. Harper, freshly graduated and working 2 part-time jobs to support her mother, spilled an entire iced latte on his paperwork. She apologized until her throat burned. Brendan only laughed, brushing off the mess like it didn't matter. "It's just paper," he'd said warmly, "but you're something special." Those words were gasoline poured onto a lonely heart. Brendan pursued her with a charm she had never experienced. He brought her pastries before her shifts. He listened when she talked about caring for her sick mother. He told her she deserved more stability, more comfort, more life. She believed him. How could she not? She'd grown up stretching every dollar, dreaming of a life not defined by overdue bills and hospital visits. Brendan offered escape. Or so she thought. They married in a small courthouse ceremony. Nothing glamorous, but full of laughter. He promised he would take her to New York one day, that he would work hard enough for both of them. Harper, who had always carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, let herself rest in that promise. When Brendan finally landed a junior analyst job in Manhattan, Harper packed their entire life into 2 suitcases. They moved into a modest Brooklyn apartment with noisy neighbors and a window view blocked by a brick wall. Still, she was happy. She worked late nights doing bookkeeping for small shops, saved every penny, cooked cheap meals, and encouraged him through every setback. She ironed his shirts before interviews, stayed up reviewing his presentations on her old MacBook Air, and reminded him that success wasn't far away. But something shifted the moment he got his first promotion. Brendan started coming home later, smelling faintly of expensive cologne she didn't own. He stopped asking about her day. He bought a shiny Citizen watch and claimed it was a reward for hard work. Though they were behind on rent, He joked about how Harper didn't really fit at corporate events. At first, she laughed it off. Then she started staying home because he insisted it help him look more polished. Love slowly turned into distance. Distance turned into condescension. Condescension turned into coldness. Harper didn't know it then, but Brendan wasn't building a future for both of them. He was building an escape plan. And she was becoming the burden he wanted to outrun. For a long time, Harper Lane believed marriage meant teamwork. Two people building a life shoulder to shoulder. But with Brendan Hale, she was the only one carrying the weight. And the tragedy was, she didn't realize it until much later. The first year in New York was brutal. Brendan's junior analyst salary barely covered groceries, so Harper picked up a second job at a tiny accounting office near Flatbush Avenue. She'd sit behind an old Dell computer, entering receipts until her fingers cramped, then hurry home to cook dinner before Brendan walked in. He always insisted he needed a clear mind to study for exams and certifications, so Harper quietly took on the rest. Cleaning, organizing, supporting, cheering. Every night while he practiced financial modeling on a gleaming MacBook Pro she bought on credit, Harper reviewed his notes, rewrote his slides, and stayed awake until he felt confident enough to sleep. Sometimes she'd pass out on the couch before sunrise, still wearing her work clothes. Brendan never once asked why she looked so tired. But the sacrifices didn't stop there. When her mother's medical bills spiked, Harper sold the only valuable item she owned. A delicate gold necklace her dad gave her before he passed. She cried quietly as she handed it over at a pawn shop in Brooklyn, telling herself it was temporary. Brendan barely noticed it was gone. When she mentioned the bills, he sighed and told her, "We can't afford to carry emotional dead weight. Focus on the future." So she did. She took freelance bookkeeping jobs at night, restaurants, laundromats, corner stores, anything to bridge the gap. She skipped lunches to pay off Brendan's old student loan. She canceled her gym membership, avoided buying clothes, and wore the same worn flats for nearly 2 years. But every dollar she saved went into Brendan's career. New suits for interviews, networking dinners he insisted were essential, courses that promised promotions. Once his boss complimented his neatly pressed shirts. Brendan accepted the praise with a smug smile, never mentioning Harper spent hours each week ironing them while balancing their unstable finances. But the worst sacrifice came later. Harper had been offered a full-time accounting position at a reputable mid-sized firm. Good salary, benefits, stability. When she told Brendan, expecting him to celebrate, he frowned instead. "Harper, come on. If you take that job, what happens to my schedule? I need flexibility. I need you available. This is my breakthrough year. Don't ruin it." Ruin it. The word stung more than she admitted. So Harper declined the offer, telling the hiring manager some polite excuse. She chose Brendan's dreams over her survival. She chose partnership over independence. She chose love over logic. And Brendan? He chose himself. He always did. But Harper wouldn't understand just how deep that selfishness ran, how much of her life he had quietly drained, until the night everything shattered. And by then, it would be too late to escape without losing everything. The first time Harper Lane saw Savannah Pierce, nothing about the woman screamed danger. She was just another polished New York professional. Sharp blazer, perfect blowout, heels clicking confidently on marble floors. Harper didn't even know her name then. She only knew she didn't belong at Hale & Rowe Capital's networking mixer, the kind Brendan insisted she stay away from to avoid embarrassing him. But that night, something in her heart told her to ignore his warning. Harper arrived quietly, holding a homemade casserole she'd prepared because Brendan said there wouldn't be enough snacks. She felt underdressed in her simple navy dress from a department store clearance rack. She scanned the crowded rooftop lounge overlooking Park Avenue until she spotted him, Brendan, laughing loudly, a glass of champagne in hand. But he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, too close to be just a colleague. She was stunning in a deliberately effortless way. Smoky eyes, ruby lips, sleek hair pinned neatly. Her posture radiated confidence, but her smile was a weapon, the kind that sliced without leaving visible scars. Harper froze mid-step, casserole clutched in her hands like a shield. Brendan saw her, but his expression didn't soften. If anything, it tightened. That was the first sign something was wrong. "Harper, what are you doing here?" he asked, annoyance slipping through the polished edges of his voice. I thought I'd bring dinner, she said quietly. You sounded stressed. Savannah's gaze swept over Harper, slow and assessing, like she was evaluating a thrift store item someone accidentally brought into a luxury boutique. Brendan cleared his throat. You shouldn't have come. These events are, image sensitive. Savannah laughed lightly. Brendan, she's sweet, reminds me of a teacher's aide I had in 3rd grade. The crowd around them chuckled. Harper's cheeks burned. She forced a polite smile. Nice to meet you? Savannah? The woman said, extending a manicured hand. Savannah Pierce. I handle PR for the firm. PR. Suddenly it made sense why she looked camera-ready. Brendan jumped in quickly, too quickly. She's been helping me with media strategies, purely professional. Harper hadn't asked, but the answer felt rehearsed. The rest of the evening was a blur. She placed the casserole on a table no one touched. She watched Brendan and Savannah whisper together, exchange glances too intimate for business partners, bump shoulders like they'd done it 1,000 times. At one point, Harper stepped outside to breathe. She looked down at the traffic glittering beneath Park Avenue and told herself she was overthinking. Brendan worked in a cutthroat industry. Of course he needed PR support. But deep inside, a truth she wasn't ready to face pressed against her ribs. He didn't need support. He needed replacement. And Savannah Pierce was already stepping into that role. Smiling, shining, and slowly taking the place Harper never imagined she'd lose. What Harper didn't know was that Savannah had been in Brendan's life far longer than she realized. And she was about to find proof in the cruelest way possible. Harper Lane thought the worst part of discovering Brendan's betrayal would be the moment she confirmed her suspicions. She was wrong. The true agony came afterward, slow, calculated, and delivered with the precision of a man who had prepared his escape long before she ever sensed danger. It started with a single photo. One rainy Tuesday evening, Harper rushed home early with groceries, hoping to surprise Brendan with his favorite pasta. But when she stepped into the apartment, she heard laughter. Light, feminine, echoing from Brendan's office. The door was cracked open, just slightly, enough for Harper to see a flash of red lipstick on Savannah's mouth as she leaned over Brendan's desk, her fingers brushing his wrist like they'd shared that intimacy many times. Harper froze. Savannah spotted her first. Oh, she said softly, like she'd caught a stray cat wandering into the wrong backyard. Brendan turned and went pale. The next 10 minutes shattered their marriage. Brendan stumbled through excuses, blaming Harper's lack of ambition, her small-town mindset, even her clothes. Savannah watched with cold amusement, arms crossed as if witnessing a show she'd already seen. Harper left shaking, holding onto the banister like the building might tilt. But Brendan wasn't done. 2 days later, she received divorce papers, thick, heavy, and delivered by a man in a suit who couldn't look her in the eye. Brendan hadn't asked to talk, hadn't asked what she needed. He had already built the narrative. And the narrative was this: Harper Lane was unstable, irresponsible with money, and emotionally volatile, a complete fabrication. But Brendan's lawyer was one of Manhattan's most ruthless. His firm sent documents full of twisted half-truths. Harper had refused job opportunities, had burdened Brendan financially, had created an unsafe emotional environment. It was a character assassination disguised in legal terminology. Harper showed up to court in a borrowed blouse and flats with thinning soles. Brendan arrived in a tailored suit, Savannah at his side, whispering in his ear like she was already the wife. The judge, overwhelmed with cases and swayed by polished presentations, ruled quickly. Harper walked away with almost nothing. No savings, no stake in the apartment, no claim to the car she helped him buy. Nothing but a box of clothes and a single line of advice from the judge. You're young. You can start over. Start over. As if her world hadn't just been bulldozed. Outside the courthouse, Brendan approached her with Savannah on his arm. His voice was smooth, practiced. This is for the best, Harper. You were holding me back. You'll understand eventually. Savannah smiled sympathetically, but her eyes glittered with victory. Harper couldn't speak. Her throat felt crushed. Brendan placed sunglasses over his smug expression, ushered Savannah into a sleek Mercedes S-Class, and said the words that would haunt Harper for months: try not to fall apart. The car door closed. The marriage ended, and Harper Lane stood alone on the courthouse steps, clutching papers that felt like her obituary, never imagining the trap Brendan set was only the beginning, and far from the worst. Harper Lane didn't realize how deeply Brendan had planned her downfall until she tried rebuilding her life. She thought losing the marriage was the worst pain she'd ever feel. But the real devastation came afterward, quiet, merciless, and inescapable. 2 weeks after the divorce, Harper walked into a midtown accounting firm with her resume freshly printed and hope trembling in her chest. She'd spent hours preparing, practicing answers in the bathroom mirror of her tiny rental room. She needed this job. She needed anything. The HR manager shook her hand politely, then froze. "Oh," the woman said, eyes flickering with recognition. "You're that Harper Lane." Confusion ran cold through Harper's veins. What do you mean?" The woman offered a strained smile. "Mr. Hale used to work with a board member here. I'm sorry, but we can't move forward." Harper left the building numb, with the city spinning around her. She didn't know that Brendan had already poisoned her name in half the firms across Manhattan. He'd called her unstable, financially irresponsible, and emotionally unpredictable. In an industry obsessed with clean reputations, his words were a death sentence. She applied everywhere. She sent 50 resumes. She got 20 interviews. She lost all 20 within minutes. Soon afterward, her credit score plummeted, mysteriously. A credit card she'd never opened suddenly appeared in collections. When she called the bank, they told her the application contained her name and previous address. Brendan's handwriting on the form was unmistakable, but she had no money for a lawyer. No backup, no protection. Then came the worst blow. Her landlord knocked on her door at 7 a.m., holding a printed notice. "Rent's going up," he announced. "Market adjustment." It wasn't market adjustment, it was retaliation. Brendan had been whispering to anyone who would listen that Harper was barely hanging on, likely to default, a risk. Within 30 days, she was forced out. Harper spent the next night in her old Toyota Corolla, hugging her knees in the parking lot of a closed grocery store. Rain slammed against the windshield. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes swollen, skin pale, hair tangled, and barely recognized the woman she'd become. She felt invisible. Forgotten. Discarded. The following morning, she swallowed her pride and walked into a Barnes & Noble, applying for any position available. The manager hired her as a cashier, offering sympathetic eyes she didn't want to accept. Her uniform smelled faintly of cardboard and old ink. Her feet ached from standing 10 hours straight. Her paycheck barely covered food. Every night, she returned to the cheap room she was renting by the week. She'd heat soup on a portable burner and stare at the ceiling, wondering how Brendan slept at night knowing he'd left her with nothing. But Harper didn't break. A spark, frail but stubborn, remained alive inside her. Something whispered that her story wasn't done, that this wasn't her ending. She didn't know it yet. But losing everything was the very step that would lead her directly into the path of the most unexpected person, the man who would change everything. Harper Lane didn't believe in fate anymore. Fate felt like a cruel joke, something people with comfortable lives clung to so they didn't have to admit how easily everything could collapse. She believed in survival, in counting pennies, in showing up even when her heart felt bruised. That's why she was at Barnes & Noble early that morning, shelving a stack of new releases with tired hands. The store smelled of fresh ink and roasted coffee from the attached cafe. It was comforting, in a bittersweet way. Books didn't judge her. Books didn't whisper behind her back. Books didn't know she used to have a life that looked nothing like this. As she struggled to slide a heavy box onto a top shelf, it slipped. The box tipped. Gravity won. Before it could crash to the floor, a hand shot out, steady, fast, and sure. It caught the corner of the box effortlessly, holding it up with surprising strength. "Careful," a deep voice said, "unless you're trying to knock yourself out before lunch." Harper's breath caught as she looked up. The man standing before her wasn't the type who wandered into bookstores casually. He wore a tailored charcoal coat, the kind that belonged on someone stepping out of a Mercedes, not waiting in line at a cafe. His hair was dark, a little tousled, his jaw unshaven in a way that somehow looked intentional. And his eyes, sharp, observant, almost unsettlingly calm, studied her like she wasn't just a cashier in a green apron. "I'm fine," she muttered, embarrassed. "Just clumsy today." He set the box down gently. Long night? She stiffened. That question hit too close. Something like that. He nodded, as if he understood far more than she said. Then he picked up a book from the display, The 48 Laws of Power, and turned it over thoughtfully. That one's intense, Harper said before she could stop herself. People either buy it to learn or to manipulate. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. And which group do you think I'm in? I don't know you, she said honestly. But your coat probably cost more than my monthly rent, so I'm guessing you're not here to learn humility. He let out a low laugh. Fair enough. For a moment, something eased inside her. She hadn't made anyone laugh in months. She rang up his purchase quietly, trying not to stare at the black American Express card he handed her. His name flashed on the screen, Elias Ward. Her heart nearly stopped. She knew that name. Everyone in finance knew that name. Elias Ward, the reclusive billionaire investor, the silent force behind Wardstone Ventures, the man who'd taken down corrupt executives without ever raising his voice. What was he doing in a bookstore in Queens? Before she could make sense of it, he lifted the bag and met her eyes again. You're good at reading people, he said. That's rare. She gave a tight smile. It hasn't done me much good lately. Maybe it will, he said quietly. Then he walked out, calm, deliberate, like he hadn't just stepped through the bruised remains of her life and left something behind. Hope. Small, fragile, impossible hope. Harper Lane had no idea she would see him again, or that their next meeting would change the trajectory of her entire life. 3 days passed after Harper's unexpected run-in with Elias Ward, and she convinced herself it meant nothing. Billionaires didn't think twice about bookstore cashiers. He was probably just being polite. Still, for reasons she couldn't explain, his calm voice and sharp eyes lingered in her mind, like an echo she couldn't shake. It was a Thursday evening when everything shifted. Harper had just finished a grueling double shift. Her feet throbbed inside her worn sneakers, and her Barnes & Noble apron was dusted with bits of cardboard. She trudged through the cold Queens air, cradling a cup of cheap instant noodles she planned to heat up at home. Her phone, barely holding a charge, buzzed weakly in her coat pocket. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Bill collectors loved calling at this hour. But something nudged her thumb. Hello? A smooth, steady voice replied. Miss Lane? Her breath hitched. This is Elias Ward. She stopped walking. Right there on the sidewalk, beneath a flickering street lamp, she froze like the world had tilted slightly. Sir, did I do something wrong at the store? She stammered, heart pounding. If someone complained. No, Elias said, almost amused. Quite the opposite. I've been looking for someone with your skill set. My skill set? She repeated, stunned. I shelve books. Don't be modest, he replied. You notice details most people don't. You read people quickly. You stayed composed while handling a situation that could have gone poorly. Those traits matter. Her throat tightened. Compliments weren't something she'd heard in a long time. I have a temporary position open at Wardstone Ventures, Elias continued. Administrative work, data checks, organizational tasks. It's short-term, a few weeks at most, but well compensated. Harper blinked hard. Wardstone Ventures. The kind of office with glass walls, high floors, and people who drank lattes instead of instant coffee. She pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady herself. I don't have the resume for something like that. Let me decide that, he said calmly. Her heart beat faster. Why me? There was a pause on the line, thoughtful, heavy. Because I trust my instincts, he said simply. And my instincts tell me you deserve a chance most people wouldn't bother to give. Tears pricked her eyes unexpectedly. She wasn't used to kindness without agenda. What would I have to do? She whispered. Meet me tomorrow at our Manhattan office, Elias said. 10 a.m. I'll have security clear you. Bring nothing but yourself. Tomorrow? She echoed, breathless. Yes, he confirmed. And Harper, don't talk yourself out of this opportunity. The line clicked. Harper stood there for a full minute, staring at the dark screen of her old phone. Snowflakes drifted down softly around her. For the first time in months, her breath didn't feel tight, like she was drowning. Someone believed in her. Someone powerful. Someone who didn't know her past or her failures, but saw potential anyway. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, everything is about to change. Harper Lane barely slept the night before her first day at Wardstone Ventures. She set 3 alarms, pressed her one decent blouse, and repolished her old black flats until they looked almost professional. When she finally stepped into the Manhattan high-rise the next morning, she felt like an imposter walking into someone else's life. The lobby alone looked more expensive than anything she had ever owned. Marble floors glowing under soft lights, a towering wall of glass revealing a crisp skyline, and security guards who scanned badges with the seriousness of airport TSA. Harper clutched her purse nervously, wishing she hadn't brought the cheap tote bag she'd gotten free from a library fundraiser. "Name?" the guard asked. "Harper Lane, Mr. Ward," he said. Before she could finish, the guard's expression softened. "You're cleared, 38th floor. He told us to expect you." Expect her? The words felt surreal. The elevator shot upward, smooth and silent. When the doors opened, Harper stepped into a world she had only seen in movies. Glass walls, clean lines, muted tones, and the soft hum of productivity. People in tailored clothing typed on MacBook Pros, spoke confidently into headsets, and paced with purpose. She felt like she was walking through another species' habitat. A woman with sleek blonde hair approached, smiling warmly. "You must be Harper. I'm Camille, executive assistant to Mr. Ward. Come on, I'll show you everything." Camille guided her to a workstation near a window. Harper tried not to gape at the panoramic view of Manhattan glittering below. Her desk had a brand new monitor, a notebook embossed with Wardstone's logo, and a pen that looked too elegant for her to touch. "Today will be light," Camille said. "Mostly organizing files, cross-checking numbers, learning our system. Nothing too intense." But Harper quickly learned that nothing too intense in this world meant juggling spreadsheets with thousands of entries, cross-referencing quarterly reports, and navigating software she'd never seen. Her hands shook at first, terrified of hitting the wrong key. She didn't want Elias to regret taking a chance on her. Then, halfway through the morning, she noticed something, an expense entry buried in an acquisition file, off by just a few digits. It wasn't much, but it broke the pattern. Her bookkeeping instincts kicked in. She checked the previous quarter. Same error. Checked earlier records. Same anomaly. She flagged it quietly to Camille. Camille's eyes widened. Good catch. Very few people notice that. A tiny swell of pride rose inside Harper. Later, as she sorted documents, she overheard two senior analysts talking about restructuring deals, investment rounds, and financial projections she barely understood. But instead of shrinking, she leaned closer, absorbing every word. By lunchtime, she realized something shocking. She liked this world, loved it even. The confidence, the precision, the sense of purpose. It ignited a part of her that had been asleep for years, buried under Brendan's dismissive comments, under loneliness, under fear. When Elias returned from a meeting, he paused beside her desk. "How was your first morning?" Harper straightened. "Intense, but good." A rare smile touched his expression. "Good, don't underestimate yourself." For the first time, she didn't. What Harper didn't know was that her sharp eye, the very thing Brendan mocked, had just caught an anomaly connected to something much bigger. Something dangerous. Something tied directly to the man who had destroyed her life. By Harper's second week at Wardstone Ventures, she finally felt the slightest hint of stability. She learned the rhythm of the office, the way analysts scribbled notes during tense calls, the way the city looked from 38 floors up, like a world she might eventually belong to. Elias seemed pleased with her work, and Camille praised her attention to detail. For the first time in months, Harper breathed without feeling like her lungs were tight. But Brendan Hale wasn't done with her. He never intended to let her rebuild anything. On a gray Wednesday morning, Harper was helping organize digital files when Camille rushed over with her tablet, face tight with concern. "Harper, did you send this?" she asked, turning the screen around. It was an email, supposedly from Harper's work account, sent to several analysts and even one external partner. It contained confidential data from a project she wasn't even assigned to, along with a note that read, "Thought you should all see what's really happening behind the scenes. Harper Lane." Harper felt her stomach drop. "Camille, I swear, I never wrote that. I don't even have access to half this information." Camille studied her for a long moment. Harper's voice wasn't defensive, it was terrified. Camille exhaled. "I believe you, but this is serious. Elias needs to see this." They walked to Elias's office together. Harper's palms were sweating, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear Camille's footsteps beside her. Elias looked up from his desk as they entered. "What happened?" Camille handed him the tablet. He read the email silently. His face didn't shift, not anger or surprise, but something colder. "Calculation." Harper's voice cracked. "I didn't send that. Someone must have framed you," Elias finished calmly. She blinked. "You believe me?" "It's poorly done," he replied, tapping the screen. "The phrasing isn't yours. The metadata is altered. And whoever forged this doesn't understand our internal systems well enough to make it convincing." Relief washed over Harper so intensely she almost swayed. "But why target me?" she whispered. Camille and Elias exchanged a look, one Harper couldn't decipher. Elias leaned back. "Whoever is behind this knows you work here, and they don't want you here." A chill ran down Harper's spine. She knew exactly who didn't want her to rise again. Brendan. As if on cue, Elias's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression sharpened. "Interesting," he murmured. "Hale and Rowe just contacted our office. They've offered to warn us about you. They claim you're emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and prone to sabotaging workplaces." Harper's breath hitched. "He's poisoning you the same way he poisoned my job prospects." Elias set his phone down deliberately. "He's not very good at this." "What do you mean?" Harper asked timidly. "He wouldn't be trying this hard unless he had something to hide," Elias said. "And I intend to find out what." Harper felt her pulse race, not with fear this time, but with a strange electric sense of something shifting. Brendan thought she was weak. He thought she'd crumble again. He didn't understand the mistake he'd made. Because Harper Lane was no longer alone, and Elias Ward had just decided Brendan Hale was worth investigating. Harper Lane had survived many kinds of heartbreak, romantic, financial, emotional, but the kind that came from friendship, that one hit differently. That one carved deeper. And she never saw it coming. It began with a text message she didn't expect to receive. A familiar name appeared on her phone as she rode the subway from Wardstone one evening. "Lily Harper? Can we talk? I miss you." Lily Bennett had been her best friend since college. They used to share cheap wine on Friday nights, swap secrets, and laugh until their ribs hurt. Lily was the one who helped Harper pick her wedding dress, who held her hand when Harper's mother was hospitalized, who promised she'd always be on her side. Then the divorce happened, and Lily vanished. No calls, no messages, nothing. Harper assumed she simply didn't want to get caught in the middle between her and Brendan. She tried not to resent her, tried to understand. But tonight, seeing Lily's name again made something soft and hopeful flutter inside her. She typed back, "Sure, I get off work at 8. We can meet near Bryant Park." Lily responded instantly, "Perfect. I can't wait to see you." Harper arrived early, heart pounding as she stood by the fountain, hugging her coat against the cold breeze. When Lily finally appeared, dressed in a chic beige coat and carrying a designer purse, Harper felt painfully aware of her thrift store jacket and scuffed shoes. But Lily smiled brightly. "Harper, God, I've missed you." They hugged, and for a moment Harper believed maybe this was real. Maybe she was getting a piece of her old life back. They walked to a nearby cafe, and Harper told Lily about Barnes & Noble, about struggling to find work, and finally about the chance Elias gave her. She kept it surface level, careful not to reveal too much. Trust took time to rebuild. Lily listened, nodding sympathetically, squeezing Harper's hand at the painful parts. It felt good, comforting, safe. But there were signs. Signs Harper didn't want to see, like how Lily kept glancing at her phone, or how she asked just a little too specifically about the kind of work Harper was doing for Wardstone Ventures, or how she casually mentioned Brendan's name, testing Harper's reaction. At the end of their conversation, Lily hugged her again. "I'm so proud of you, Harper. Really." Harper walked home lighter than she had in months. But the next morning, everything shattered. Camille stormed up to Harper's desk with a printed screenshot. "Did you tell anyone about Project Atlas?" Harper's heart stalled. "No, I would never." Camille slammed the paper down. There was a leaked message thread online. Anonymous. But the words were unmistakably Harper's, because they were taken directly from their conversation last night. Lily. Her friend had recorded everything and shared it. Elias approached slowly, eyes sharp. "We traced the leak. It came from someone close to Brendan, someone with access to him. Harper didn't need to hear the name. Her knees nearly buckled. Lily. The betrayal sliced through her like ice. Elias's jaw tightened. Harper, you're not in trouble, but understand something. This wasn't an accident. Someone targeted you again. Harper swallowed hard, voice trembling. He's using her. Brendan is using my best friend to get to me. Elias looked at her for a long moment. No, he said quietly. He's afraid of you. It was the first time anyone had ever said those words. And for the first time, Harper believed they might be true. Harper Lane made it as far as the hallway outside Wardstone's restroom before her knees buckled. She pressed her palms against the cold marble wall, fighting the sting in her eyes. It wasn't just Lily's betrayal. It was the cruel confirmation that Brendan still controlled the shadows of her life. Every time she took one step forward, he found a way to shove her 3 steps back. Her breath came out shaky. The hallway blurred. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around herself like she could hold the pieces of her heart together. She hated crying at work. She hated feeling weak. But the weight of everything, losing her husband, losing her home, losing her dignity, and now losing the friend she trusted most, felt unbearable. A soft footstep echoed behind her. Harper, she stiffened. Elias Ward's voice was steady, low, and too calm for the storm inside her. She wiped her tears quickly, trying to stand. I'm fine, she said, voice cracking. I'm sorry. I just need a minute. You don't need to apologize, Elias said. Stand if you want. Sit if you want. Just breathe. She didn't stand. She couldn't. Elias crouched down so they were eye level. His tailored suit looked out of place against the sterile hallway, but nothing about his expression held judgment. You didn't deserve what happened, he said. Not the leak. Not the betrayal. Not any of it. Her voice trembled. I trusted her. She knew everything I went through, and she still sold me out. Elias nodded slowly. People with weak moral spines fold under pressure or under influence. My guess is Brendan used her, manipulated her, maybe promised her something. Harper closed her eyes. Why won't he leave me alone? Because, Elias said, you know things he doesn't want anyone else to know, and because men like him can't stand the idea of someone they discarded rising again. Harper felt another tear slip down her cheek. She was too tired to wipe it. Elias's voice softened. Harper, I'm going to offer you something, and I need you to listen before saying no. She opened her eyes. His expression was unreadable, serious but not cold. At Wardstone, we're already monitoring Hale and Rowe, he said. We've suspected irregularities for over a year. Asset misreporting, questionable transfers, numbers that don't behave the way they should. Harper frowned, confused. That has nothing to do with me. Yes, Elias said quietly, it does. A chill ran through her. You used to help Brendan with his paperwork, his models, his budgets, his projections. Elias paused. You were closer to the core than anyone else. Harper shook her head. I don't remember anything important. No, Elias said, but you remember patterns, the way numbers should behave, the way Brendan covered gaps with wording instead of math. That kind of instinct is rare, and we need it. We, Harper whispered. I'm offering you a role, Elias said. Not just temporary anymore. A position on a confidential internal team helping us investigate Hale and Rowe. Fully legal, fully protected. Harper's heart pounded. Why me? Why trust me? Because, Elias answered, studying her closely, I've seen the way you fight to rebuild your life even when everything collapses around you. And because your integrity is stronger than anything Brendan can destroy. Harper swallowed hard. What if he comes after me again? Elias's gaze hardened. Then he'll learn the mistake of underestimating you, and he won't be fighting you alone. For the first time in months, Harper felt something new. Not fear, not despair, strength. A fragile but growing belief that she wasn't powerless anymore. She looked up at Elias. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. And just like that, a new war quietly began. Harper Lane arrived early the next morning, long before most of Wardstone's analysts even stepped off their subway trains. The sky outside was still dark, the lights of Manhattan flickering like the city itself was blinking awake. She took a deep breath as she stepped out of the elevator. Today, she wasn't just a temp. She wasn't just a cashier trying to stay afloat. She was part of something bigger, something dangerous, but finally within her control. Elias had given her an access badge with new clearance. She held it carefully, almost reverently, before tapping into the secure project room. The space was quieter than the rest of the office. Frosted glass walls, soundproofing panels, and a long conference table scattered with documents, spreadsheets, and coded files. "Morning," Camille said, entering behind her with 2 coffees. "Thought you might need one." Harper accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. I'm a little nervous." "That's normal," Camille said softly. "The first time I worked with Elias, I nearly fainted. You'll do fine." Camille wasn't exaggerating. The work was intimidating. Wardstone didn't investigate lightly. If they were digging into Hale and Rowe, it meant something truly ugly simmered beneath the surface. Harper's task was simple in theory: cross-reference old financial statements Brendan worked on with current filings. But the simplicity ended there. Hours passed as Harper worked through cascading lines of numbers, patterns, and projections. She highlighted anomalies, flagged inconsistencies, and scribbled notes in the margins. She didn't realize she was muttering to herself until Camille laughed softly behind her. "You talk to spreadsheets?" Harper flushed. "Sorry, old habit." "No, keep doing it," Camille said. "Honestly, you're faster than our analysts." But Harper wasn't focused on speed. She was focused on one oddity, a number that didn't belong. It appeared in an old Excel sheet she recognized instantly. Brendan had worked on that one the year he received his first major bonus. She remembered because she'd stayed up 3 nights helping him reorganize the layout. There, tucked into a column of legitimate assets, was a transfer amount with a pattern she instantly recognized. It was the same type of gap filler Brendan used years earlier when he wanted his projections to look stronger than they were. She frowned and pulled up a newer document. The exact same amount appeared again, copied forward, disguised under a different label. Her pulse quickened. She brought up a 3rd file, then a 4th. The number kept reappearing, carrying through years of reports, morphing just slightly each time. It was like finding the same thumbprint in different rooms of a crime scene. "Camille?" Harper whispered. "Come look at this." Camille leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "What am I looking at?" "This amount here," Harper said, pointing. "It's been moved across different accounts for years, always just small enough to avoid triggering audits, always attached to different terms: miscellaneous holdings, deferred assets, consultant credits." Camille's eyes widened. "This is intentional." "Extremely," Harper said quietly. "And whoever did this didn't expect anyone to notice the pattern behind the relabeling." Camille straightened. "Wait here. I'm calling Elias." Within minutes, Elias stepped into the room, his expression alert. "Show me," he said. Harper walked him through the trail, documenting each shift, each disguise, each breadcrumb. When she finished, Elias didn't speak right away. His jaw ticked, his eyes sharpened, and a slow understanding settled over him. "This," he said finally, "is the missing piece." Harper's breath caught. "The missing piece of what?" Elias looked at her. "Proof that Brendan Hale has been hiding millions." Her heart thundered. "Millions. And thanks to you," Elias added, "we can finally expose him." A chill ran through Harper, not of fear this time, but of realization. For the first time, her past was no longer a curse. It was leverage. Harper Lane barely slept that night. Her mind replayed the numbers, the patterns, the ghostly fingerprints Brendan had left all over those financial statements. She had always known he was arrogant, manipulative, cruel in quiet ways. But this was different. This was criminal. And she had uncovered the trail without even realizing she was doing it. The next morning, when she arrived at Wardstone's secure conference room, Elias Ward was already there. He stood by the panoramic window overlooking Manhattan, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Sunlight cut across his shoulders, outlining him like a figure carved from stone. "Sit, Harper," he said without turning around. Something about his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Controlled, heavy, loaded with something she couldn't place. She took a seat slowly. "Did I do something wrong?" Elias finally faced her. "No. In fact, you've done something extraordinary. But before we continue, there's something you need to understand." He walked to the table, placing a thick folder in front of her. It was labeled HRC Investigation, Confidential. "Wardstone has been watching Hale and Rowe for nearly 2 years, he said. "We suspected irregularities, but Brendan, your ex-husband, is clever. He shifts numbers just enough to stay under the radar, just enough to confuse auditors. Our analysts caught fragments, but never a full pattern. Harper felt her pulse quicken. Because he's done this before. Yes, Elias said, and because you helped him once. Her stomach dropped. I didn't know. I'm not blaming you, Elias said firmly, taking the seat across from her. You were supporting a husband you trusted. You weren't trained to see the deeper intent behind those adjustments. But unintentionally, you became the only person who knows exactly how Brendan hides his tracks. He opened the folder and spread out several documents. Each highlighted section mirrored the anomalies Harper found the day before. Do you see this? Elias tapped the pages. This is the pattern we've been missing. He never expected someone to recognize his old tricks. Harper leaned forward. So what happens now? Elias hesitated. It wasn't fear, Harper could tell, but rather calculation, caution. Wardstone can move forward with an investigation, he said. A serious one, but we need context, testimony, insight into why he manipulated these numbers the way he did. Testimony? Harper whispered. You mean you want me to? Yes, Elias said gently, but listen carefully. You wouldn't be a whistleblower. You wouldn't be going public. You'd be an internal witness, protected under federal confidentiality agreements. Your role would stay strictly within Wardstone. Harper looked down at her hands. Brendan will come after me. He already has, Elias reminded her, voice soft but firm. The fake emails, the leaked conversation, the sabotage. He's fighting a war you didn't start. Harper swallowed hard. Why me? Why help me at all? Elias's gaze held hers, steady and intense. Because you deserve justice, he said, and because you're the only one who can help us make sure Brendan Hale never hurts another person again. Her throat tightened. No one had ever said those words to her. You deserve justice. Elias leaned back slightly. But there's more. Her breath hitched. More? A leak inside Hale & Rowe told us Brendan intends to announce a major expansion at his upcoming gala. It's a front, a distraction. Once he announces it publicly, exposing him becomes much harder. Harper froze. The gala? The same gala Brendan invited her to, just to humiliate her. Elias lowered his voice. We need to move before then. And Harper, your insight might be the key to stopping him. Harper didn't tremble this time. For the first time, she sharpened. Brendan had taken her home, her stability, her reputation. Now she held the weapon that could take everything from him. Harper Lane sat completely still, the conference room silent except for the faint hum of the city below. Elias Ward's words lingered in the air like smoke. You're the key. She'd spent months believing she was powerless, a footnote in Brendan's narrative. Now Elias was telling her that the very knowledge Brendan once mocked her for might be the thing that unraveled him. Elias folded his hands on the table. Harper, before you answer anything, I need to be clear. This won't be easy. It won't be safe. Brendan is already panicking. Men like him make reckless choices when their lies start collapsing. Her voice wavered. So you're asking me to help you take him down? No, Elias corrected gently. I'm asking you to help us uncover the truth. What happens next will be the consequence of his actions, not yours. But Harper knew the truth. Consequences hit hardest when they were deserved. She looked at the documents again. Years of manipulation, hidden transfers, fabricated numbers, transactions that harmed innocent employees and investors who trusted him. It wasn't just selfishness, it was corruption. A memory flickered. Brendan laughing at their kitchen table, calling Harper too soft to make tough decisions. Another memory, him accusing her of ruining his life when she confronted him about Savannah. Another, him standing on courthouse steps telling her, try not to fall apart. Maybe she had fallen apart, but she had also rebuilt. She lifted her chin. Tell me what you need me to do. Elias didn't smile, not the way someone victorious would. He exhaled quietly, almost relieved. We're forming a small internal team. Your role would be to identify repeated patterns Brendan used, times he inflated valuations, disguised losses, shifted shortfalls. We'll use that as the foundation for a formal inquiry. Harper nodded slowly. Okay. There's more, Elias said carefully. We need someone who understands his behavior, his impulses. We believe he'll try to use the upcoming gala to announce a false expansion. If he does, investors could pour millions into a vacuum. If that happens, exposing him will become nearly impossible. Harper felt a chill. So the gala is a smokescreen. Yes, and we intend to strip that smokescreen away, publicly. Her breath caught. Publicly? Not you, Elias assured. Never you. But we need someone who can confirm the discrepancies before we confront him at the event. A strange wave of fear and power moved through her. You want me there, Harper whispered. At the gala. Elias met her eyes. Only if you choose to be. It's not required. But Brendan expects you to show up broken. If you appear beside a firm investigating him with confidence instead of fear, it will shake him hard. Harper pictured it. Brendan's face twisting, Savannah stiffening, the room of elites watching as everything he'd built trembled beneath him. Not because Harper sought revenge, but because the truth demanded the world finally see him for who he was. What if I'm not strong enough, she whispered. You are, Elias said simply. You've survived worse than this, and you won't stand alone. Something warm flickered inside her chest, small, steady, dangerous. Okay, she said quietly. I'll help you. Elias nodded. Then we begin tonight. Harper inhaled deeply. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't stepping into a battle as the broken one. She was stepping in as the one holding the match. The next days unfolded like a storm moving in slow motion. Quiet on the surface, electric underneath. Harper Lane was no longer just organizing files or highlighting suspicious numbers. She met with Wardstone's legal team, learned what she could safely say, what she must avoid, and how to protect herself if Brendan tried to retaliate again. Every session left her exhausted but sharper, more aware of her own strength. But the biggest challenge wasn't legal. It was emotional. The thought of seeing Brendan again, standing in the same room where he planned to parade her humiliation, made her stomach twist. Old memories surfaced like bruises. The cold tone of his voice, the way he made her feel small in rooms full of strangers, the look of irritation every time she didn't fit the image. She hated that part of her, still flinched at the thought. Wardstone's team noticed. So did Elias. One evening after a long strategy meeting, Elias walked her to the lobby. His voice was quieter than usual, thoughtful. You're not required to attend, Harper. Our evidence will stand with or without you. She looked up at him. But he invited me for a reason. He wants everyone to see me fail. He wants them to think I regret leaving him. You didn't leave him, Elias reminded her. He threw you away to polish his ego. Harper swallowed. Exactly. And I want that room to see the truth. Elias studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Then we'll prepare you properly. He wasn't kidding. The next morning, Harper was introduced to someone she'd only heard mentioned in passing. Olivia Ward, Elias's younger sister, a fashion consultant with clients across Manhattan's elite circles. Olivia swept into the conference room in a flurry of perfume and confidence. So this is the woman causing my brother to rearrange his entire schedule, Olivia teased. Hi, Harper, don't worry. I'm here to make sure you walk into that gala looking untouchable. Harper blinked. Untouchable? Olivia grinned. Oh, sweetheart. We're past presentable. Brendan expects you to show up like the ghost of his past. We're going to make you look like the future he'll never reach. Harper wasn't used to this kind of attention, but Olivia was gentle, warm, and incredibly intuitive. She asked about Harper's comfort level, her insecurities, her strengths. Then she arranged a fitting at a refined boutique on Fifth Avenue. Harper stepped into a dressing room surrounded by soft lighting and silk hangers, worlds away from thrift stores and clearance racks. Olivia selected a deep emerald gown, elegant yet understated, with clean lines that made Harper look poised and statuesque. When Harper stepped in front of the mirror, she barely recognized herself. This isn't me, she whispered. Yes, Olivia said softly, standing behind her. This is who you were always meant to be. You just needed someone to remind you. Harper's vision blurred, not with sadness, but something like healing. Accessories were chosen with the same care. A simple diamond pendant, delicate earrings, nothing overstated. A borrowed Cartier bracelet from Olivia's personal collection completed the look. When she walked back into Wardstone that afternoon, heads subtly turned. Even Camille smiled wistfully. Brendan won't know what hit him. Later that evening, Elias approached her workstation. His eyes lingered on her for a second longer than usual. Just a flicker, just enough. You look ready, he said. Harper lifted her chin. For the gala? For everything, Elias replied. And for the first time she believed him. She wasn't preparing for a social event. She was preparing for a reckoning. The night of the gala arrived with the sharp chill of early winter sweeping through Manhattan. The Plaza Hotel glowed like a golden kingdom against the dark sky, its grand entrance framed by photographers, luxury cars, and guests dressed like royalty. Brendan Hale had chosen this venue for a reason: power, prestige, spectacle. It was the perfect stage for him to boast, to preen, to show the world how high he'd climbed. What he didn't know was that tonight, someone else would steal the stage entirely. Harper Lane stood inside her small Queens apartment, staring at her reflection one last time before she left. Olivia's emerald gown draped over her body like it belonged to her, the Cartier bracelet catching soft glimmers of light with every breath she took. Her hair flowed in polished waves, and her makeup, soft, glowing, impossibly elegant, enhanced the strength that had taken months to rebuild. She barely recognized the woman in the mirror, but she recognized the eyes. They were steady, determined, unbreakable. A knock sounded at her door. Harper opened it and froze. Elias Ward stood there in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, the kind that seemed sculpted rather than sewn. But what caught her breath wasn't his presence, it was the look in his eyes when he saw her. Something softened, something warmed, something shifted. "Harper," he said quietly, like the name itself deserved reverence. "You look extraordinary." Her cheeks flushed. "Thank you. And you look like a man who's about to walk into a battle with the strongest woman in the room," he finished gently. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elias extended his hand. "Ready?" Harper inhaled deeply and placed her hand in his. "Ready." The car ride to the plaza was quiet but charged. As they approached the entrance, Harper felt her heartbeat rise. She remembered all those evenings Brendan told her she didn't belong in places like this, that she wasn't polished enough, confident enough, sophisticated enough. Tonight, she would walk through those doors with a billionaire by her side. Not as decor, not as someone's afterthought, but as someone who rebuilt herself from the ground up. When their car rolled to a stop, a valet opened her door. Harper stepped out into a swirl of camera flashes and murmurs. Her gown shimmered beneath the golden lights. For a moment, the world slowed, just enough for her to feel the weight of every step she took. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that? No way. That's Harper Lane with Elias Ward? She looks incredible. Brendan's ex-wife? Oh my God, wait until he sees." Then the doors opened. Inside, chandeliers glittered overhead, and music floated through the grand ballroom. Brendan stood near the stage, laughing loudly with Savannah on his arm. He looked smug, relaxed, certain of his dominance, until he turned. His smile froze. His glass slipped slightly in his hand. Color drained from Savannah's face. Harper didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She simply lifted her chin and walked forward with Elias beside her, two silhouettes cutting through a room built for games of power. Every eye followed her. Every whisper grew louder. Tonight wasn't about revenge. Tonight was about truth. And Brendan Hale had no idea how close his lies were to exploding under the dazzling lights of his own celebration. The moment Harper Lane stepped fully into the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faltered. Glasses paused midair. Even the orchestra seemed to soften, as if the entire room was inhaling at once. Standing beside Elias Ward, she looked like someone carved from light and resolve, nothing like the broken ex-wife Brendan had promised people she would be. But Brendan, for the first time in his life, looked rattled. He blinked once, twice. His jaw tightened. He recovered too late. Savannah Pierce whispered something sharply into his ear, but Brendan didn't respond. His eyes stayed locked on Harper, fury flickering beneath the surface of his carefully constructed charm. He hadn't expected her to come. He certainly hadn't expected her to arrive arm in arm with the man he feared most in the finance world. Elias guided Harper through the crowd with calm confidence, stopping occasionally to greet investors who stared at Harper with awe, curiosity, and no small measure of admiration. When they reached the center of the room, Brendan forced a smile and stepped toward them. "Harper," he said, his voice taut, "you look different." Harper matched his stare. "So do you. Desperation doesn't suit you." The surrounding guests perked up, sensing tension. Brendan's smile dropped for half a second before snapping back on. "And Elias," Brendan said, turning stiffly, "I didn't realize you would bring a date." Elias's voice was cool. "I didn't realize you were still sending personal invitations to people you've mistreated." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Brendan's hand tightened around his champagne glass. Savannah tugged subtly at his sleeve, her silent cue to stay composed. Brendan cleared his throat and turned toward the stage. "I should begin the presentation," he said sharply. As Brendan walked away, Harper exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled for a second before Elias gently placed his palm over hers, grounding her. "You're doing well," he said quietly. "He's already unraveling." The lights dimmed as Brendan stepped onto the stage. A massive screen lit up behind him, displaying Hale and Rowe's logo. He launched into his speech, full of exaggerated confidence, bragging about record-breaking growth, historic returns, and a bold new expansion that will redefine the industry. But he didn't know Wardstone had taken control of the room's momentum. Because halfway through Brendan's speech, Elias gave a subtle nod to Wardstone's head of compliance standing near the tech booth. And the screen behind Brendan changed. Charts flickered, numbers shifted, a new slide appeared, one Brendan had never seen. Unexplained asset transfers, 5 years recurring concealed losses pattern identified across multiple reports. The audience leaned forward, confused murmurs swelling. Brendan froze. This isn't my presentation," he snapped, spinning toward the tech crew. But Elias had already stepped onto the edge of the stage. "Your presentation begins now," Elias said calmly. Gasps echoed. Savannah's face went pale. Harper watched, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with the fierce satisfaction of truth finally clawing its way to the surface. Elias spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "For years, Hale and Rowe Capital has reported numbers that don't match asset behavior. Tonight, for the sake of transparency and investor protection, Wardstone Ventures is presenting the discrepancies we've uncovered." Brendan sputtered. "You have no right." "We have every right," Elias said, "especially when your data is built on fraud." The room erupted into shocked whispers. One investor rose to his feet. "Mr. Hale, is this true?" Brendan's face turned crimson. "This is a setup. Someone manipulated." Harper stepped forward, her voice steady. "No one manipulated anything. You just didn't expect the person who once covered your tracks to recognize them again." Brendan's eyes widened in horror. A second investor shouted, "We demand an audit." A third yelled, "Call the board." Savannah took one look at the collapsing room and quietly stepped away from Brendan, blending into the crowd. Brendan stood alone on the stage, drenched in humiliation, his empire cracking in real time. And Harper Lane, for the first time in years, felt free. Chaos didn't fully break loose inside the plaza's ballroom until the board members of Hale and Rowe arrived, pulled from their tables by frantic phone calls and furious whispers. Cameras were lowered, investors shouted, staff scrambled, and Brendan Hale stood frozen beneath the unforgiving white lights, stripped of the polish he'd worn like armor for years. Harper Lane watched from the edge of the stage, her pulse steady for the first time since their marriage collapsed. She'd pictured this moment in 1,000 different ways, screaming at him, crying, begging for answers. But the reality was different. She didn't feel rage. She didn't feel triumph. She felt release. Brendan stumbled forward as 3 board members surrounded him. "Explain the discrepancies. Why were these numbers hidden? Did you falsify filings? Were you moving investor funds without authorization?" Brendan's face was blotchy, his breath unsteady. He glanced toward Savannah for backup, but she was gone. She'd slipped out the moment the tide turned, leaving him exposed. Cowards recognize each other and abandon each other. Brendan pointed shakily at Harper. She's lying. She's doing this to punish me." A board member turned sharply. "Miss Lane isn't the source. Wardstone compiled this evidence. Multiple analysts verified it." Elias stepped forward, voice cool and cutting. "And Miss Lane is the only reason these patterns were identified so quickly. Your downfall is your own design, Brendan." Brendan's expression crumpled into disbelief. "You can't do this to me. I built this company." "You built a facade," Elias replied. "Now it collapses." Security approached. Not at Wardstone's request, but the board's. They needed witnesses out. They needed control. They needed to contain the scandal before it hit headlines. Harper turned away as Brendan shouted her name. "Harper, Harper, don't walk away from me." She didn't stop, didn't flinch, didn't even look back. Elias's hand gently touched her back, guiding her away from the chaos. "Come on," he murmured. "You've done enough for tonight." As they stepped into a quieter hallway, Harper exhaled shakily. Is this Really happening? Elias nodded. By morning he'll be under formal investigation. The SEC was already watching him. Now they have cause to move. Harper pressed a hand to her chest. And Lily? Savannah? Savannah will distance herself to save her career. Lily. Elias paused. Lily made her choice, but Brendan won't be in a position to use her anymore. Harper swallowed hard. That hurt more than she wanted to admit. Elias studied her expression. Losing a friend like that isn't a sign of your failure. It's a sign of their weakness. Harper blinked away the sting in her eyes. I never wanted to destroy him, Elias. I just didn't want him to destroy me. And you didn't let him, Elias said softly. That matters. They stepped outside the plaza together. The cold air hit her cheeks, grounding her. Sirens wailed in the distance, the city's heartbeat loud and alive around them. Elias turned to her. Harper, what you did tonight took extraordinary courage. It didn't feel like courage, she whispered. It felt like surviving. Sometimes, Elias said, that's the same thing. Harper looked back at the glowing windows of the plaza, where Brendan's empire was crumbling floor by floor. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel broken. She felt new. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been earned. The morning after the gala felt unreal, quiet, almost gentle, as though New York itself was giving Harper Lane a moment to breathe. She woke up in her modest Queens apartment, expecting the usual heaviness, the familiar dread that settled on her chest each morning. But it wasn't there. Instead, she felt light, untethered, free. Her phone buzzed nonstop. News alerts, articles, breaking stories. Hale and Rowe Capital under federal investigation. CEO Brendan Hale, suspended pending audit. Sources claim massive fraud scheme uncovered. Harper skimmed the headlines with a strange mixture of disbelief and calm. The world was finally seeing Brendan for who he was. Not because she screamed, not because she begged for someone to believe her. Because the truth had finally outrun his lies. Still wrapped in her blanket, Harper set the phone aside and closed her eyes. She expected to feel vindicated, triumphant, victorious. Instead, she just felt done. She had no desire to watch his downfall like entertainment. No urge to see him dragged through the mud the way he once dragged her. She only wanted peace. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. When she opened it, Elias Ward stood there, hands in his pockets, hair still damp from the morning air, wearing a simple sweater instead of a tailored suit. He looked almost human, less like the untouchable billionaire the world saw, and more like a man who had chosen to be exactly where he was. Morning, he said softly. Harper smiled, surprised by how easily it came. Morning. May I come in? She nodded, stepping aside. Her apartment was small, cluttered with second-hand furniture and old books, but Elias didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. I wanted to check on you, he said. Last night was a lot. Harper exhaled. I'm okay, actually. I think I'm better than I've been in years. Elias nodded slowly, as if he expected that. Good. There was a pause, warm, unhurried. I also came because we have an offer for you, he continued. A real one, not temporary. Wardstone wants you as a full-time analyst in our internal audit division. Long-term, stable, with full benefits and an advancement track. Harper's breath caught. Elias, I don't know if I'm qualified. You are, he said firmly, because you see what others miss, because you have integrity most people only pretend to have, and because you earned this, not through pity, not through luck, but through resilience. Her throat tightened. Thank you. Truly. There's more, Elias added gently. Harper blinked. More? Elias stepped closer, carefully, respectfully. Last night, watching you walk into that ballroom, watching you stand tall despite everything. Harper, I haven't felt something hit me that hard in a long time. Her breath caught. Her pulse fluttered. I don't want to confuse professional respect with personal feelings, he continued. But I'd like to know if we might explore something beyond that. When you're ready. Harper's eyes filled, not with pain this time, but with something warm and full. She took a slow breath. Elias, I think I'd like that. He smiled, soft, real, almost boyish. Good. They stood there in her tiny apartment, the city humming outside, the past finally settling behind her. Harper Lane had been betrayed, broken, discarded, but she had rebuilt, risen, and now, fully and finally, she had been chosen. Not as an afterthought, not as a consolation prize, but as a woman of worth. Justice had found her, love had found her, and life, real life, was finally beginning. And that's it. Story finally comes to a close. But if you are still here, listening until the very last moments, then something in Harper's journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe you've been knocked down before. Maybe someone underestimated you. Maybe life pushed you into a corner where you had to rebuild from nothing. If that's you, then remember this. Like the Stoics said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Harper didn't win because life got easier. She won because she refused to let cruelty define her. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Every betrayal Harper faced became the very path that led her to strength, clarity, and real love. And that can be true for you too. Your pain isn't an ending, it's the doorway. If this story made you feel seen, understood, or a little bit stronger, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Not just for us, but so these stories can keep reminding you that you are worth more than what tried to break you. We'll meet again in the next story, my friend.